What's up guys, it's Ryan and you're watching Ryan Vision. If you haven't already, make sure you like the video and subscribe for more. Everything that's been done to this Jeep has been covered in the videos, and everything that's still going to be done will be covered as well. So make sure you subscribe, that way you don't miss out on anything. Today I'm trying something a little different. I'm using my girlfriend's camera. It's a Nikon, I think it's a D3200, so I'm actually shooting in 1080p today. Normally I'm only shooting in 720, so let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you like it. If you do, I think I might pick up a camera like this so I can shoot in 1080 from now on and have the cool stuff like the manual focus and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, in this video basically want to show you some things. If you've been following the video, you know that last weekend went through the Rubicon trail and finally conquered it. And about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, me and my buddy Joel Gonzalez, who's done a ton of work on this Jeep, we went to the Rubicon really unprepared. Our vehicles weren't prepared, we weren't prepared, and as a result of that, we suffered a lot of damage. And so over the past year, we've been rebuilding the Jeep, and it's just been awesome. So we went back last weekend and just tore it up. We even did optional stuff like little sleuths, you know, you can bypass it, and we bypassed it last year. This year we went right through it, and everything that we did to the vehicle over the last year has really paid off. So basically what this video is going to be is kind of like a Rubicon 101. I'm going to let you know what the trail's like, what you need to be prepared for, what kind of spare parts you should bring, what kind of supplies you should bring, like camping wise, and just basically how to be prepared and how to prepare your vehicle. So let's get right into it. Okay, the first thing that's really important on the Rubicon trail is you want to have some really nice tires, some fresh tires, because even if you have some older tires with decent tread on them, if they're really hard and dried out, you're not going to get any traction, especially if you hit a wet spot. And that's the other thing, up there in the Rubicon, you know, you're in the El Dorado and Tahoe National Forest. Weather's very unpredictable. Last year when we went, we weren't expecting any rain, and on the last couple days it did start raining, and it made it really hard to get traction on the rocks. So you want to get some good tires. The tires I can recommend for you, I've got a couple. You're looking right now at my Goodyear Wrangler MTRs. They have the Kevlar sidewall, and they're a 35 by 1250, and I'm running the stock 15 by 7 wheel. Now, all of that's really important. The reason I'm running a 15 by 7 wheel is because that narrow wheel allows me to run a lot less air pressure in these. So the trade-off there is also when I'm on the road, if I had these inflated up to 35 psi, this thing would handle like crap, and I would only wear out the center of the tire because it would be bubbled out in the center. So I run them between 18 and 20 psi on the street, which of course kind of kills the gas mileage, but with a 5.2 V8 I'm only getting 9 miles per gallon. I'm not really concerned about gas mileage. And you just have to do things differently. Running low pressure, like taking U-turns, you want to slow it down a little bit. But off-road, like on the Rubicon trail, we went down to 12 psi, and if you watch some of the videos from the Rubicon trail, you'll see how these things just wrap around rocks. It doesn't matter what shape the rock is, or if the sidewall needs to grab, it does whatever it needs to do, and it just gets the traction. That's really what you need to do. I've seen so many videos and so many people in person where they're just sitting there spinning the tires, and all you need to do is air them down. So again, really important to have some fresh tires, fresh soft tires, not dried out, with plenty of tread, a nice aggressive sidewall, and check them before you go to make sure you don't have any like screws in them, any kind of leak or puncture. Check your valve stems and carry spare valve stems with you. Anything that screws up your tires can definitely screw up your Rubicon trip or any other trail trip for that matter. And also make sure you have a spare, a full-size spare. I always carry a 35 1250 spare in the back when I'm going out on the trail. So really important. Some other tires I can recommend are the BF Goodrich Mud Terrains, the KM2s, they're awesome. Also the Mickey Thompson Baja Claws. I'm sure there's a lot of other good tires, so if you have any recommendations, leave them in the comments below. But those are the only ones I can personally recommend. Another thing that's, you know, I feel is important, but is definitely optional. I would say if you're going with a group of guys, and you should never go alone, especially on something like the Rubicon Trail, you want to have at least one other vehicle with you in case you get stuck or something, you need a pull. But a winch, I mean, it is cheap insurance, guys. Watch the other video on this winch. It didn't cost a lot, the whole winch plate and the winch itself, and it pays off. This last trip, didn't have to use it to pull my Jeep out, and you know, we didn't really need to use it at all, but my buddy Nate, he got hung up on a rock right in the center. It was a big old rock, and so, you know, if he tried to go forward, he couldn't go anywhere. He tried to go backward, he couldn't go anywhere. And I said, hey, you know, this is a good opportunity for me to test the winch out. So I hooked him up with a 9,500 pound winch and just reeled him in like a fish, pulled him off that rock backwards. So it comes in really handy. And I mean, worst case scenario, if you had to, let's say you broke down near the end of the trail, you could winch yourself up. Let's say you only had, let's say you didn't break down, but you had 2-wheel drive and you broke a front drive shaft or something, you didn't have 4-wheel drive. You could winch yourself if you had to up all the difficult stuff and then drive what you could in 2-wheel drive. I really think you could get out with a winch, even if you ended up burning the winch up running it so much. At least you'd get your vehicle out back onto the road and get you and your family or your friends home. So winch is really important. I would say have at least one in your group, and you know, it really pays off. Like I said, it's cheap insurance. One of the things you need to be aware of and be prepared for is rocker damage. Okay, I'm sitting on right around 7 to 8 inches of lift on 35-inch tires, and I got some rocker damage. I mean, I got really bad rocker damage when I went last year on 3.5 inches of lift and 35-inch tires, but I still hit my rockers. I know that for a fact because these were painted nice and fresh black before we went, and you can see where the paint's been scuffed off, and I even had to take a big hammer and hammer down so the door could open and close freely. And also my driver's side rocker was in a lot better shape before the trip, and now it's you know, jammed up just like this one is. So the best thing I could tell you here is you need to have rock sliders. No matter how tall you are, what lift you have, you need to have rock sliders. They're a cheap investment, maybe like $400 for the bolt-on ones, because if you don't, you know, pretty much if you did what I did, you go to the Rubicon, you don't spend the $400 on the bolt-on rock sliders, you screw your rocker panels up so bad and your pinch seam on the bottom so bad that you can no longer use bolt-on rock sliders. So now what I'm going to have to end up doing is cutting off the entire rocker panel on both sides and replacing it with some custom, you know, probably some square tubing, maybe like a 4x2, or, you know, I'll figure it out, but basically get some 1/4 inch thick steel on there, and then get it all tied into the unibody and the uniframe there, and, you know, have something that I can come down on a big rock and it won't bend, it won't do anything except get some scratches that I can just touch up with paint. So be aware, if you don't go up to the trail with rock sliders, you will come back with rocker damage. That's a guarantee. Even if you do the bypasses, when you get into stuff like big sloughs, you're going to get some rocker damage. You're going to slide off rocks, you know, you'll have a nice line, but you're going to slide off a rock and land right on your rocker. You'll feel it. It's a terrible feeling, and, you know, you instantly did hundreds of dollars in damage. This is not a cheap part to have a body shop fix. So get your rock sliders, or cut these things off and do some custom rock sliders before you go. You definitely will end up getting some damage on brackets, lower control arm brackets, shock absorber brackets. You can see how they've been, you know, bent and scuffed up badly, scraped by big rocks. That's going to happen. In the front, I've got heavy duty lower control arm mounts welded to the axle. Those things are solid. These are the OEM ones you're looking at. So, you know, if you got the time, you got the money, you got the resources, I would say go ahead and get you some heavy duty lower control arm mounts for your front and rear axles. I'm running the ones in the front from Rusty's Off-Road. They've been great. They fit perfectly. They're really thick, really strong, because the bottom line is no matter what, you're going to drag these things eventually across the rock, and the stock stuff will bend. Differential covers are really important. This Jeep's running a D44A rear axle, so it's pretty susceptible to damage from rocks because it has an aluminum center section. There's not much I can do about that, but as far as the differential cover, this is the OEM one, and you can see it's got a big old dent right in the center there, and on the bottom you can see I caught a rock and actually peeled it off, and I got lucky it didn't start leaking. But I don't know if you'll see it on the camera, even that bottom bolt and maybe one up from the bottom, the bolt head has been ground off too, so that's going to be a pain to get off. The front one was bashed up really bad before I went to the Solid Axle Industries front diff cover, and I had to basically go one size smaller and hammer a socket onto the bolt head in order to twist it off. So there is a company that makes heavy duty rear diff covers for a D44A. I contacted them and you know, asked them if they wanted to support Project ZJ. I haven't heard back from them yet. So we'll see what happens with that, but I want to get a heavy duty rear differential cover on here. That way if you do have to back up and you hit a rock, you won't get a bend like this, because if you get a bend bad enough, you can run into some problems. So here's the front Dana 30 Solid Axle Industries differential cover, and you can see it's really heavy duty, and what I like is it uses Allen bolts, so you don't run into the issue I was just talking about where the bolt heads get, you know, completely ground and chipped off. This thing definitely made some contact with rocks on the Rubicon trail, but you wouldn't even know it. It's just really strong. It's a beautiful piece, and also you can see that the fill plug is much higher than the stock one, so you can fit a lot more fluid in here. I think I'm running about 1.5 quarts, maybe a little more than 1.5 quarts in here. And this thing's just been working out really good. You can hit it on rocks, it's very forgiving, you can back up, you haven't damaged anything. So definitely recommend heavy duty differential covers front and rear. You can see I'm running Iron Rock Offroad's over the knuckle heavy duty steering kit. This is really important to have high clearance on a trail like the Rubicon. And notice I'm not running any steering stabilizers at all. The thing with steering stabilizers is if you have your suspension, everything dialed in, your alignment dialed in, your tire pressure dialed in, you can get these Jeeps to handle really, really good without having steering stabilizers. And that's where I'm at right now. So steering stabilizers were just always in the way. They're hanging down too low, or the one that runs up high will bind up and things at extreme flex. So I got rid of them because you will smash the lower steering stabilizers on rocks and bust them completely open to where all the fluid will leak out. So I find them pretty pointless once you get your setup all dialed in and it handles really nice. The other thing that's awesome about this steering kit is it's 1.25 inch solid cold rolled steel. If I cut these tubes in half, well, I shouldn't even say tubes, they're solid steel. There's no tubing, they're not hollow like some of the stuff I had from other companies. So strongly recommend getting something like Iron Rock Offroad over the knuckle steering. You get more steering clearance because the tie rod's higher up above the steering knuckle, and you have more strength because it's solid steel. So if you bump into a rock, it's not going to bend. You can back up and keep going without any problems. Make sure you have extended brake lines, and you know, the steel brake lines are awesome. They perform really well and they hold up against rocks and stuff if anything happens to hit them. But the Rubicon Trail is not a place where you want to have any problems with your brakes. There's a lot of cliffs, a lot of drop-offs, a lot of pretty scary stuff if you're not in control of your vehicle. And what you want to do is, before you go to the Rubicon Trail, you want to flex out your Jeep completely and make sure that nothing's rubbing. You don't want the tires rubbing on stuff so they could get cut. You don't want the brake lines pulling real tight to where they could get damaged, because once you have a leak in your brake system, you're pretty much screwed. As far as controlling on downhills and stuff like that. So just, you know, flex it out in every direction you can, as much as you can before you go on the trail to make sure everything's good. Just check all your clearances and check all your measurements to make sure your shocks can stretch out all the way without binding up and breaking. You don't really want your shocks to be the only limiting factor, you know, looking at things like limiting straps, bump stops, things like that. And again, make sure that your brake lines are the proper length for your suspension lift and how much your vehicle flexes. It's a really good idea, if you don't have one already, to get down to a pick and pull or something like that, some kind of junkyard, and find a fuel tank skid plate, because these fuel tanks on these Jeeps, they're plastic and you want some heavy duty steel protecting it. You can see this one's been drug across some rocks. You don't want to drag your plastic tank. You want to have some steel there to keep your tank from getting damaged, from getting punctured, anything like that. It's very important to have toe points, front and rear. You saw on the front, on the winch mounting plate or mounting bracket, I had two really big D-rings. You know, you don't always have to winch. You can have somebody else pull you out, but you need to have some heavy duty brackets that they can hook onto with a tow strap or their winch, you know, however you want to do it. You don't want to hook to things like your front axle. You know, I've seen guys try radiator support. You don't want to do that. You want to have something that's actually tapped into the frame. In this case, in the rear, I've got a tow hook coming out of my trailer hitch, my 2-inch receiver there. So this works out great if I need to pull someone or if I need someone to pull me. So make sure you have tow points front and back. Okay, you can see here I've got some damage on my Rock Offroad rear long arm subframe assembly. Basically, I drug this across a really big jagged rock. Now there's nothing that I need to do since it's Rock Offroad stuff. It's real solid. Everything still works fine. But this is the kind of stuff that's going to be happening, you know, so just be aware you're going to have some scrapes on your control arms when you come back. You are going to have to drag those across some rocks. If you're running subframes, you may have some damage like this. It's not the end of the world. It doesn't look the best, but, you know, it still works great. It's functional. Just be aware that you are going to have this kind of damage when you get back from the trail. If you can get a hold of some differential guards, I'm not talking differential covers, I'm talking the guards that actually go underneath and it's like a skid plate and let you slide, and some of them even come up and protect your yoke. Get some of those. Great investment, especially if you have these D44A. You can see I've scraped the aluminum there. It's a good idea to have some steel there to protect it and be able to slide across rocks. Also, as far as spare parts, make sure you have spare U-joints, and you can see those little clasps there with the two bolts holding the U-joint on to the yoke there. You want to have spare of those too. So you can even get those at AutoZone. You can get them at junkyards. I went to AutoZone and I bought like, I don't know how many of them, either 4 of them or 8 of them. I got a whole bunch. So you definitely, you know, get as many caps and bolts as you can in case you bend them, in case you break a bolt, because those are only little 8mm bolts. You want to have plenty of spares, and have spares for your buddies, especially if you're all running similar rigs, because, you know, if one guy breaks down, even if you're fine, you either got to tow him out or something. You're not going to leave your buddy. So make sure you always have plenty of spare U-joints and the clamps and the bolts. It's a good idea to check out bar pin eliminators for the front shocks. The factory bar pin setup's pretty weak. I switched out because I couldn't stand the noises that it made. You know, you get a lot of clunking and stuff. But these are Rock Offroad's bar pin eliminators, and they're awesome. They bolt onto the stock location, and then the shock bolts onto them. This is what you need when you're doing extreme flexing. You know, this isn't something that's going to get damaged by rocks. It's something that could get bent by flexing or bottoming out really hard. So that's why you want to get away from the bar pins and get yourself some bar pin eliminators from Rock Offroad. Another great investment is an onboard air compressor. This comes in really handy. If you're on the trail and you have air tools, you'll be able to run them with this. And also when you get done with the trail, since you've probably been aired down to like 12 psi or somewhere around there, you don't want to drive home like that if you're not trailering your rig. So you're going to want to air back up to whatever you run on the street before you drive home. So this thing worked out great. This is from Rock Offroad also, and aired my tires back up, my friend Mitchell's tires back up. He's got 35s on an XJ, and my friend Nathan's 32-inch tires on a ZJ. Aired them all up, no problem. And also on the trail we ran into an issue with my fuel tank skid plate making contact with the track bar bolt in the rear. So Joel actually fired this thing up with I guess it was just like an air cutter, you know, a cutting wheel, and basically cut it, and you know, it took a lot of work from the compressor, because that's pretty much like having an open air line when you're using a cutting tool like that. But it got the job done. It let us cut the steel, you know, a good section of it, at least 6 to 8 inches off, to get us the clearance that we needed, so we weren't banging that thing every time we went over a rock and flexed out. So definitely look into an onboard air compressor. It's just another one of those inexpensive things that's awesome to have. And I mentioned earlier, it's important to have a spare tire, a full-size spare. In the back of a ZJ, you can actually fit a 35 1250. Just wedge it against the seat. You don't have to lean the seat forward or anything like that, and then slam the hatch shut on it, and it'll hold it in place. It won't fall sideways, it can't move frontwards or backwards, so it works out perfectly. Make sure you have a full-size spare and check the pressure of it to make sure it's not leaking before you go out on the trail. Also, what comes in handy with a spare is if you did have a bad valve stem or something on the tires you were running on the trail, you could take what you needed off your spare. Well, that's about it for the vehicle prep, guys, so let me just give you a recap. You want to make sure you got some nice fresh tires that you can air down to somewhere around 12 psi, maybe 15 psi if you don't have a real narrow rim that's going to seat the bead really well. You want to make sure you have plenty of ground clearance, and if you don't, or even if you do, make sure you get some rock sliders before you hit the trail so you don't get the rocker damage like you see on my Jeep. Make sure you get some high clearance steering if possible, so you don't risk damaging your tie rod, which will screw up your alignment and can make it difficult to continue wheeling and also to get home even on the road because your alignment will be messed up. Make sure that your shocks are the right length. Make sure that your brake lines are the right length. Make sure nothing's binding up at full flex. Make sure you're not hitting tires on any sharp metal edges that could cause them to get sliced, either in the tread or on the sidewalls. Make sure you have toe points front and rear. You can see I got the D-rings in the front and I showed you my tow hook in the rear. Definitely want to have toe points. And onboard air, somebody in your group should have it. That way you can air your tires back up for the trip home. And also some things that I didn't show you, but make sure that your cooling system's all dialed in. Check all your fluid levels before you go. I'm talking everything: transfer case, transmission, your coolant, your oil, absolutely every fluid, your differential fluid. Check them all, top them off if needed, and make sure your cooling system's good to go. If you're overheating on the road, you're going to overheat on the trail. Look into a Taurus electric 2-speed fan. It comes with a shroud assembly. You can get them brand new on eBay for around $80, or you can find them in 90 to 95. Tauruses, Mercury Sables, and Lincoln Mark 8s with the 3.8 V6. Pick that up, get it wired in. It fits really nicely on a ZJ radiator and made a world of difference for me. I was having heating issues before I did the fan swap. Even on low speed, it never let the motor get to 210. It was always below 210, which is perfect. Operating temperatures right around 210. So on the trail, on a warm day, never hit 210 on low speed with the Taurus fan. Also look into a transmission cooler. I'm running a B&M super cooler, and I bypass the factory cooler that's integrated into the radiator. That also helps keep the engine temperatures down and the transmission temperatures down, which you want to do when you're wheeling. So that's about it, guys. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anything in this little recap of everything I just covered. But check out ironrockoffroad.com. They've got tons of stuff that you're going to need for a trail like the Rubicon, because it's strong, it's going to stand up to the abuse, and it's not going to leave you stranded on the trail. Alright guys, so we've talked about what you need to do as far as preparing the Jeep itself, but now let's talk about what you need to bring to prepare yourself, and also so that you can take care of the Jeep if anything goes wrong. Bring every fluid that you can. Go to the store and get fluids if you don't have them. You're going to want to have plenty of coolant, plenty of oil, ATF4, because you can use that in power steering, in the transmission, in the transfer case. You want to have plenty of ATF4. Just any fluids you can think of, bring them. Bring gear oil. I've got a big cardboard box just full of all the fluids that I ever use on this Jeep. That way, no matter what happens, if we have to drop something and reseal it and fill it back up, we can do it. So make sure you have plenty of fluids. As I mentioned earlier, make sure you have plenty of U-joints and the straps and the bolts that hold those on. And also make sure you have tons of tools. I bring 2 complete toolboxes with me everywhere we go when we're on a trail. So we've got every socket known to man, you know, even the really big sockets like the 36mm that you got to use to get the front axle shafts off. I brought spare front axle shafts. If you have spare drive shafts, bring them. And you know, that's the thing, is eventually once you're done with your Jeep, or even if you're not done, what you have to do is kind of budget some money for spare parts too. You need to buy things like axle shafts if you don't have spares. In my case, the front, I upgraded those to Iron Rock Offroad's 760X Spicer U-joint axle shafts with the almost alloy kit. So then I had the spare factory CV axle shafts, you know, as spares. So I brought those, but what I need to do now is get an axle shaft or two for the rear, so I have spares in the rear too, because you snap one of those, you're screwed. So make sure you bring all the spare parts you can. I also brought things like spare radiator hoses, a spare serpentine belt, radiator cap, thermostat, you know, some hoses, some wiring, everything you can think of, bring it. You should have a big box or a big bin, an ice chest, some sort of way to carry all this stuff. The other thing is, when you're loading the Jeep, you want to make sure everything's secure. You're going to hit a lot of off-camber obstacles. The Jeep's going to be leaning really hard. You don't want anything to suddenly shift the weight or slam into someone that's in the Jeep, or even go through a window. So you want to use straps, or you want to pack stuff in there really tightly. My buddy Ron, on this last trip, he did a great job organizing all the stuff in the Jeep. Nothing moved around at all. He was able to access everything he needed to throughout the trip. He knew where everything was. Basically, he asked us what we needed, he got it. He didn't want us messing with his system, and that was perfect. So get everything in there secured really tight. As far as supplies for yourself, bring tons of water. Go to Walmart and buy those huge packs of like 1 million water bottles. Get a couple of them, because you can never have too much water. You're going to want to drink it. You're going to want to brush your teeth. You can use it to get clean with. You can use it to cook with, you know, boil stuff, cook those cup of noodles, things like that. You want to have plenty of water. Don't ever short yourself on water.